marble staircase of Voss Tower caught the morning light like the edge of a blade. Serena Voss descended it the way she did everything, without hesitation, without assistance, each step measured and precise. She had memorized every floor of this building. She didn't need to see it. Then her foot found the crack in the stone, invisible until it wasn't. Her body tilted forward. 4 men in black stood within arm's reach. Not one of them moved. Then a hand, steady, certain, caught her at the shoulder before she reached the floor. No sound, just a grip that knew exactly where to be. The 4 men looked at each other. None of them had an answer. They were paid to be that answer. The man who caught her was not. Marcus Hale started his shift at 6 in the morning, the same way he started every morning, in the basement of a building that didn't know his name. The parking structure beneath Voss Tower smelled like exhaust and cold concrete, and his job was to stand near the elevator bank, check the entry log, and direct vehicles that had wandered into the wrong level. It was the kind of work that made people look through you instead of at you. Marcus didn't mind. He preferred it. He was 38 years old. He had a jawline that hadn't softened with age, gray threading through the hair at his temples, and eyes that moved constantly without ever looking restless. His uniform was pressed. His boots were clean. Both of these things were noticed by no one. Before he had driven to the tower that morning, he had made breakfast: scrambled eggs, wheat toast, a glass of orange juice he left on the counter for his son. Jesse was 8, and Jesse's morning ritual involved drawing in his notebook for exactly 12 minutes before eating anything. Marcus had learned not to interrupt the 12 minutes. He'd learned a lot of things about Jesse in 3 years of doing this alone. Jesse's mother had died when the boy was 5. Her name had been Claire, and she had laughed at things other people missed, and she had known, without Marcus ever explaining it, why he had left the kind of work he used to do. She had understood the weight of it. She was the only person who ever had. Marcus drove Jesse to school every morning, a route that took 11 minutes. He didn't fill the silence with radio or conversation. He watched the mirrors. He noted the same blue sedan that had been parked on Clifton Avenue for 3 consecutive mornings. He memorized the license plate. Jesse drew in the passenger seat and didn't ask why his father's eyes kept moving. At the tower, the men who ran the security detail treated Marcus the way people treat furniture that has been placed in a slightly inconvenient location. Ray Colton, the head of the protection unit, assigned Marcus to the parking level, to exterior door checks, to anything that kept him below the sightline of anyone important. Ray was a large man with a practiced air of authority and the habit of standing slightly too close when he delivered instructions. "You're on B2 again this week," Ray told him one afternoon, barely glancing up from his tablet, "and I need you to stay off the upper floors during the reception on Thursday. We've got a full team up there." Marcus said nothing. He took the assignment sheet. He read it once, folded it, and put it in his chest pocket. In the elevator on the way down, he opened a small notebook, the kind sold at pharmacy checkout counters, and wrote something in a shorthand that would have been illegible to anyone watching. He had been watching Voss Tower for 3 weeks. He had been noticing things for 3 weeks. He had not yet decided what to do about them. Serena Voss did not conduct board meetings. She presided over them. There was a difference, and the people seated around the 14th floor conference table at Voss Industries understood it without needing it explained. She sat at the head of the table with her hands folded and her face composed into an expression of neutral attention. She had been told over the years that her blindness made people uncomfortable in these settings, that they didn't know where to look when she spoke, that her stillness read as something other than confidence. She had stopped caring about that approximately 2 years ago, around the time she realized that her discomfort made other people more honest. Fear was a useful tool. So was patience. "The Hartwell contract," she said, without preamble, as her assistant finished distributing copies. "Walk me through Section 7. The general counsel cleared his throat and began reading. He got 3 sentences in before Serena raised one hand. "Stop. Read the last clause of Section 7, subsection C, again." He read it. The room was quiet. "That clause transfers arbitration rights to a jurisdiction that isn't covered under our existing insurance structure," Serena said. "If we sign that, any dispute in the next 5 years gets handled under terms we haven't evaluated. We're not signing it." The general counsel blinked. That would require a full legal review then get a full legal review. That's what I just said." Derek Shaw, seated to her right, leaned forward slightly. He was the kind of man who had learned to make every movement look like he was being helpful, who had positioned himself at Serena's right hand for 3 years by being available, agreeable, and just competent enough to be indispensable without threatening anyone. Serena, the Hartwell people are expecting an answer by Friday. If we push the timeline, then they wait until we're ready. She turned her head toward the window, though the view meant nothing to her. I won't sign something I don't understand. Neither will this company. Derek smiled the way men smile when they are filing information away for later use. He wrote something on his notepad. The pen moved longer than the exchange warranted. The meeting ended, and the room emptied in the way. Rooms empty when people are relieved to leave. Serena stayed seated for an additional 4 minutes, listening to the building. She had learned to do that, to listen to structure the way sighted people watched a room empty. Footsteps, the click of a closing door, the particular silence that followed when she was genuinely alone. She was rarely as alone as people assumed she was. After the meeting, Derek made a phone call from his car in the garage. He didn't notice the man in the basement-level uniform standing near the stairwell, 15 feet away, with his back turned and his phone angled at a specific degree in his breast pocket. He never noticed men in that uniform. That was the point. Marcus had been watching the car for 6 days. Every Thursday, without exception, a vehicle that parked in the same orientation, in a visitor spot that wasn't registered to anyone on record, for exactly 40 minutes before leaving. The plates were always different. The parking angle was always identical. The engine idled for the same duration before shutdown. Someone had been trained to behave consistently. Consistent behavior was a fingerprint. Fingerprints could be documented. He took the photograph. He walked back toward the elevator without looking at the car as he passed it. The notebook in his chest pocket had 4 pages on Derek Shaw already. He added one more line. The reception on Thursday was for a defense contractor out of Arlington, the kind of event that required name badges, catered trays, and the kind of conversation that sounds meaningful and says nothing. The main lobby of Voss Tower had been reorganized for the occasion. Tall tables, soft lighting, a string quartet near the east wall. The guests were the type who wore expensive suits with practiced casualness, who shook hands by gripping the other person's elbow, who understood that events like this were not social but structural, a way of putting the right people in the same room and letting proximity do its work. Marcus had been assigned to the service entrance, which meant he was technically not supposed to be standing near the reception desk at all when the event began. He was standing there anyway. He had taken his position before the guests arrived and had not been asked to move, because he was standing at exactly the angle that made him look like someone with a purpose. This was something he had learned a long time ago. Presence was mostly geometry. Stand with intention, and people assume the intention is authorized. Ray Colton spotted him from across the lobby and crossed the room with the purposeful stride of a man who enjoyed being purposeful. "I thought I was clear about positioning," Ray said, keeping his voice low but not low enough. "I finished my post early," Marcus said. "I can cover the East Corridor until—" "You're not assigned to the East Corridor." A man in a tailored suit, one of the Arlington guests, glanced over. Ray smiled in his direction, then turned back with his expression unchanged but his posture slightly more exaggerated. The way people stand when they want an audience to see them performing authority. Derek Shaw had been watching from near the bar. He walked over with the ease of someone who considered every room his to move through at whatever pace he chose. He looked at Marcus the way people look at something they can't quite place, not because it's interesting, but because its presence is slightly inconvenient. "Isn't this the parking garage guy?" Derek said, to Ray, not to Marcus. His voice was just loud enough. "What are you doing up here?" The question landed the way it was designed to land. Not aggressive enough to require a response, not quiet enough to go unheard. The nearest cluster of guests shifted slightly, the particular adjustment of people who are pretending they aren't listening. Marcus didn't answer immediately. He let the silence sit for exactly 1 beat, long enough for the people nearby to register that he hadn't flinched, that he was not embarrassed, that whatever was being performed for the room was not landing the way it was intended. "Checking the East Corridor, sir," he said. "Flat, correct, nothing to push back against." Someone near the bar laughed at something else entirely, but the timing made it feel like an echo of something. Derek smiled the satisfied smile of a man who believes he has just handled something. Ray's expression settled into something similar. Marcus moved toward the corridor. He didn't hurry. He didn't look at the floor. His eyes moved once briefly, deliberately to the position of camera 4, mounted at the angle of the east wall. He had noted 3 days ago that it had a partial blind spot. He filed the observation without comment. Across the room, Serena Voss stood near the entrance with a glass of water and the composed stillness she wore like a second uniform. She had heard the exchange. She had particularly good hearing. It was something that happened gradually, a kind of compensation, a recalibration of attention. She didn't know the voice of the man who had been spoken to, but she had noted the quality of his silence afterward, the absence of damage in it. She leaned slightly toward Priya, the man they just spoke to. Find out his name. Priya looked across the room. The corridor was already empty. She made a note. The camera in the 12th floor corridor had been adjusted. It was a small change, 3 degrees of horizontal rotation, just enough to shift the coverage zone and leave a section of the hallway unmonitored, the section that sat directly outside the door to conference room C, where Serena Voss held her most sensitive briefings. Marcus had noticed it on a Tuesday morning, when he was doing a sweep of the upper floors during a gap in his schedule. He hadn't been assigned to the upper floors. He was there because he had learned that unassigned time was the most honest time. No one was watching what he watched, when no one thought he was watching anything. He stood in front of the camera for a long moment, noting the precise angle of its housing. Then he went to the maintenance closet, found the adjustment tool, climbed the ladder, and corrected it. The whole process took 4 minutes. He logged it in the maintenance record as a routine calibration. Then he opened his notebook and wrote down the date, the camera number, and the degree of original displacement. He drew a small arrow. Below it, he wrote a name. That same afternoon, a man named Gerald Foss arrived for a meeting with Serena, a vendor representative from a technology firm that supplied encryption software to Voss Industries. Foss was a backslapper. He was the kind of man who built rapport through physical contact, who put his hand on shoulders and gripped arms, and treated every interaction like a transaction he was closing. Serena could not see him coming. She couldn't track the angle of an outstretched arm. In meetings like this, her assistant usually positioned herself nearby to provide a physical buffer without drawing attention to the reason for it. Priya was on the phone in the hallway when Foss entered. Marcus was standing near the water station at the end of the conference table. He had no reason to be there and had manufactured one involving a maintenance check on the HVAC return vent. He watched Foss cross toward Serena, watched the man's right hand begin to rise toward her shoulder in greeting. Marcus moved 1 step to the left, placing himself in the path of the gesture in a way that required Foss to redirect naturally. The man turned slightly, offered the handshake to Marcus, first out of spatial instinct, then turned back to Serena with less forward momentum. It was the kind of maneuver that was invisible unless you knew what you were watching. No one in the room knew what they were watching. Serena shook Foss's hand at exactly the right angle, as though the approach had been perfectly calibrated to her. Because it had been, she said nothing about it. But something registered some shift in the air of the room that she could not explain. Ray called Marcus into the security office at 4 o'clock. You logged a camera adjustment on 12, he said. Yes. Who authorized that? It's in the maintenance log. That's the authorization. I'm asking who told you to do it. No one told me not to. Marcus looked at him steadily. The camera was 3 degrees off its documented position. I corrected it and logged it. That's within maintenance protocol. He paused. Did you read the maintenance log? Ray didn't answer. The silence in the room was a specific kind of silence. The kind that happens when a person with authority realizes they don't have an answer. The product launch was at the Meridian Hotel, 12 blocks from Voss Tower, on a Wednesday afternoon. The event was on Serena's calendar, but the security rotation for the day listed her as remaining at headquarters. Someone had failed to update the external movement protocol, or someone had made sure it wasn't updated. There was a difference between those two things, and Marcus had spent 3 days deciding which one was true. He had concluded it was the second. He had been watching the Wednesday pattern for 3 weeks. 11 documented instances of a vehicle arriving within 1 hour of Serena's unscheduled external movements. Always the same parking behavior, always different plates, always within the same 40-minute window before she left the building. The data wasn't a coincidence. Coincidences didn't repeat at that frequency with that consistency. This was a surveillance pattern. Someone was tracking her movements to coordinate something that only needed to happen once. Marcus arrived at the Meridian at 2 in the afternoon, telling the parking supervisor he was doing a route assessment for a potential VIP movement. He walked the event space with the thorough, unhurried attention of someone who had done this in other buildings, in other cities, under conditions that made the Meridian Hotel look controlled by comparison. He measured the stage riser height with his palm against the edge. He located the backup audio board behind a curtain near the catering entrance. He found the 3 exits, measured their distances from the stage, and noted which one could be opened from the outside with a standard passkey. He took a position near the center of the room by 3:15. At 3:22, Ray called. "Where are you?" "Route assessment." "For what vehicle movement?" "Nothing's authorized today." "Then I'll log it as recon, and we can discuss it Monday." "Marcus." He ended the call. Then he settled into his position, sightlines to the stage, both main exits, and the secondary door near the catering station. He could hold this position for hours without looking like he was holding it. That was something you either learned or you didn't. The event began at 4. Serena took the stage to measured applause. Her navigation of the space was practiced and exact. She had been given the floor plan that morning and had spent 20 minutes with it before leaving the tower. To anyone watching, she moved with the assurance of someone who could see every corner of the room. At 4:22, the main audio feed cut out. Not dramatically, it dropped mid-sentence, a flat electronic silence that made the audience shift in their seats and look at each other with the particular uncertainty of people who don't know whether to be concerned. The event coordinator made frantic gestures at the sound table. Serena stopped speaking and stood at the microphone with her hands at her sides, waiting, giving nothing to the room. The 2 security officers assigned to her exchanged a look across the stage. Neither of them moved toward the audio problem. Neither of them knew where the backup board was. Marcus registered all of this in approximately 4 seconds, but in the corner of his vision, something else had already moved. A man near the back of the room, medium build, gray jacket, the unhurried pace of someone walking toward a predetermined location, was crossing toward the secondary exit near catering. He was moving against the current of concern in the room, away from the disruption, away from the stage. He had not once looked up. Marcus had seen that face, not in person. In a photograph he had taken 11 days ago in the B-level stairwell. He had a choice to make in less than 2 seconds. He made it before he was fully conscious of making it. He turned away from the audio station and moved toward the stage. The stage at the Meridian was raised 14 inches, a standard height for a ballroom presentation. The step down was on the left side, which was where Serena had entered, and which was where she would exit. She had measured it that morning. She had pressed her fingertips against the riser edge during setup and counted the width of the step. She had the number memorized. She knew exactly how far to extend her foot. What she hadn't measured was the way the left side step had been recarpeted recently, sometime in the last 2 weeks, based on the absence of wear at the corner, and the edge of the new material had been laid slightly uneven, folded inward by perhaps 1/4 of an inch. An installation error, not sabotage, just negligence. But on a surface, Serena was navigating by memory rather than sight. 1/4 of an inch was enough. Her foot found the edge of the step at the wrong angle. The carpet gave slightly under the ball of her foot in a way that didn't match her stored reference point. Her weight transferred before the correction could happen. Her body tipped forward with the quiet finality of physics. The 2 assigned security officers were positioned 4 feet behind her, and 90 degrees off-axis, standard rear coverage formation for a stationary principal, completely wrong for a principal in motion on an elevated surface. They saw it happen the way people see things that are already beyond their reach. Marcus had been moving for 6 seconds already. He had seen her shift her weight before the step, had registered the angle of the carpet edge when he'd walked the stage 2 hours earlier, had placed himself at the bottom left corner of the riser for exactly this reason, and no other. His hand reached her shoulder at the moment her center of gravity crossed past recovery. He didn't grab. Grabbing would have pulled her sideways, which was worse. He guided, flattening his forearm against her upper arm and absorbing her forward momentum through controlled resistance, redirecting it downward and back until she found the ground with her own feet. Smooth, expected, as though she had simply stepped down with someone nearby. He held the contact for exactly as long as was necessary. 3 seconds. Then his arm dropped, and he stepped back to his original position. The room had gone briefly, collectively still. Then someone near the front began applauding. They assumed it was choreographed. Some moment of ceremony they hadn't been briefed on. The applause moved outward in a wave. Serena stood without moving for 1 breath. 2. Her hands did not reach for anything to steady herself. She composed herself the way she always composed herself, starting from her core, moving outward, invisible to anyone who didn't know what composure cost. "Who just caught me?" she said. Her voice was low, not for the room, for the immediate air around her. Her 2 guards looked at each other with the expression of people who have been caught not doing their job. Neither of them spoke, because neither of them had been close enough to be the answer. Marcus was 3 steps away, facing the side exit, already scanning the room for the gray jacket. It was gone. The secondary door was closed. The man had moved through it, and vanished during the 90 seconds it had taken Marcus to prevent a different kind of disaster. He noted the time. He noted the direction. He filed it, without letting it show on his face. Priya materialized at Serena's side, with the practiced speed of someone who anticipates rather than reacts. She took Serena's arm at the exact angle Serena had trained her to use and began walking her toward the private exit at the back of the room. But Priya had been watching. She had seen the uniform. Not the face, she was too far away for that, but the color and cut of the jacket. She had seen that uniform in a maintenance log 3 days ago, attached to a camera calibration note on the 12th floor. She pulled out her phone as they walked and typed herself a single word. Camera 12. She would pull the hotel footage the moment they returned, and when she found the name that matched the uniform, she would go directly to Serena before she went anywhere else. The office on the 14th floor was quiet at 7 in the evening. Most of the building had emptied. Serena sat behind her desk with her hands flat on the surface, and her head slightly tilted, the posture she took when she was thinking in a way she didn't want interrupted. Priya had shown her the hotel camera footage in the only way she could verbally, in precise detail, describing what happened and who appeared at which moment. Serena had listened without moving for 4 minutes. Then she had said one word. "Name," Priya said. "Marcus Hale. He's listed as a level 2 security officer. Parking and exterior posts. He's been with the company for 6 weeks. Bring him up." Marcus arrived without changing his expression. He stood inside the door until Serena said to sit, and then he sat. The chair was across the desk from her. Priya stood to the left, near the window. Serena said, "You were at the Meridian today. You weren't assigned there." "No. You adjusted a camera on the 12th floor last Tuesday." "You weren't assigned to maintenance on that floor either." "No. So you're in the habit of doing things you haven't been authorized to do." "I'm in the habit of doing things that need to be done." The room held that sentence for a moment. Serena's expression didn't change. "Tell me why you were at the Meridian." Marcus looked at her directly. "Your movement schedule had a gap. The external security rotation hadn't been updated to account for the event. 2 people were assigned to cover you who had never walked the venue. I walked it." "Who told you there was a gap?" "I read the schedule." "Anyone could have, but no one else did." He didn't answer that. It wasn't a question. Serena leaned back. "You have a level 2 clearance. You have no listed background in advanced security work. Your personnel file shows 5 years of private event staffing and a GED. She paused. "So explain the federal clearance that expired 4 years ago." Something shifted in the room, not in Marcus, but around him. Priya looked at him. He looked at Serena. "I did a different kind of work before this," he said. "And you stopped?" "Yes." "Why?" He didn't answer immediately. Not because he was evading. Serena could hear the difference, but because the answer cost something, and he was deciding whether to spend it. "Someone I was responsible for got hurt," he said. "I wasn't in position. I left after that." The room stayed still. The door opened without a knock. Derek Shaw walked in, already talking. "Serena, I heard the man was at the hotel without authorization, and I think we need to—" "I'm in a meeting," Serena said. "I'm aware. That's why I'm—" "Derek." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I'm in a meeting." He stopped. He looked at Marcus. His expression did the thing it did when he was recalculating. He left. Marcus watched the door close. Then he looked back at Serena. She had not moved. "You can go," she said. Don't change your schedule tomorrow. He stood, pushed the chair back, and walked to the door. Mr. Hale. He stopped. The thing you saw at the hotel. The person leaving through the secondary exit. I need you to write it down. Everything you remember. He nodded once. He left. In the elevator, he sent a message to a number stored under the letter R. No name, no label. The message said, "Confirmed contact at Meridian. Need vehicle registration match by Thursday." He put the phone in his pocket and watched the floor numbers descend. The board meeting was called for 8 in the morning on a Friday, which meant Derek Shaw had worked through the night to prepare for it. The conference room on the 15th floor was the formal one, the one with the company's seal on the wall and the leather chairs that cost more than Marcus's monthly rent. 11 board members. Derek at the front, standing, with a presentation already on the screen. "I want to begin," Derek said, "by acknowledging how much this company has accomplished under Serena's leadership. That's not in question." He let the pause work. "What is in question is whether our current leadership structure is adequately designed to manage the kinds of decisions that are coming in the next 2 quarters. He outlined 3 incidents. Each one was described with the clinical precision of someone who had rehearsed the phrasing. Serena had responded slowly to a physical situation. Serena had failed to identify a contract issue that had been flagged in the supplementary materials. Serena had required repeated orientation assistance during an off-site presentation. None of it was entirely untrue. All of it was framed to mean something it didn't mean. Serena sat at the far end of the table. Her hands were folded. She listened without speaking. 3 board members were already nodding. Not enthusiastically, the small, careful nods of people who have been privately convinced before they walk into a room. At the school 4 miles away, Jesse Hale was sitting at a desk near the window, finishing a drawing. His teacher had assigned portraits. Draw someone important to you and explain why. Jesse had drawn 2 figures, one taller than the other. The taller one had its arm around the smaller one. The other figure, off to the side, had a crown that Jesse had drawn in yellow crayon. When the teacher asked him about the second figure, Jesse said, "That's the person my dad is keeping safe." He said it simply, the way children say things they haven't yet learned to be self-conscious about. The teacher wrote a note in her grade book. She didn't know what the drawing referred to. She gave it a gold star anyway. Back on the 15th floor, the service entrance opened, and a man came through pushing a document cart. He was in a maintenance uniform. No one stopped him, because carts come through during meetings sometimes and people in conference rooms have learned not to interrupt their own momentum for logistics. Derek was midway through his 4th slide when Marcus placed 3 folders on the table without speaking. "Security," Derek said. "Remove. Let him stay." Serena's voice. Clear, immediate. "Serena, he doesn't have clearance to be at a board." I said, "Let him stay." She turned her head toward where she had calculated Marcus was standing. "You have something." "Yes." "Show them." Marcus opened the first folder. He didn't explain what it was. He gave people time to look. The photographs of the vehicle at various dates, the orientation consistent across all of them, the plate numbers arranged in chronological order. The next sheet showed the rotation log of the security team, specifically the gaps in Serena's external coverage that aligned precisely with each Thursday vehicle appearance. He opened the second folder. "I'm going to stop this right now," Derek said, and his voice had changed, no longer smooth, something underneath it that hadn't been audible before. Marcus looked at him for the first time, not with hostility, with the neutral attention of someone who has already accounted for what they're looking at. "I know who was sitting in that gray vehicle every Thursday," Marcus said. His voice was quiet and level, the same register it always was. "And I think he already knows that I know." The room didn't gradually go quiet. It went quiet at once. A board member near the center of the table set down his pen. Someone else cleared their throat, and then seemed to regret it. Derek was looking at the table. Serena was completely still, but her face had shifted by some small, unnameable degree, and if you were watching carefully, you could see that she was listening with the whole of her attention pointed at the space where Marcus stood. Marcus opened the 3rd folder. He did not rush. He laid the contents across the table the way someone lays out a map, starting from the edges and working toward the center, so that the full picture only became visible when everything was in place. The board members who had been nodding along with Derek's presentation were now still, their attention pulled toward the documents with the involuntary gravity of people watching something they cannot stop. The first items were the audio files, a small recorder on the table. Marcus pressed play without announcing what it was. The voice was Ray Colton's, unmistakable to anyone in that room who had spoken to him more than twice. The conversation was brief and professional, in the way that incriminating conversations are when the participants believe they cannot be heard. Ray was receiving instructions about the external rotation schedule for the following Wednesday. The voice giving the instructions belonged to a number registered to a holding company called Meridian Equity Group. Marcus placed a single-page document beside the recorder. It showed Meridian Equity Group's registration history, its subsidiary structure, and at the end of a three-step ownership chain, a name, Derek Shaw. No one spoke. The hum of the building's ventilation system was suddenly audible. Marcus continued without pause. The vehicle that appeared every Thursday was registered under the same subsidiary. The passengers, documented via still photographs taken by a camera, Marcus had mounted in the B-level stairwell 11 days ago, logged as a routine battery replacement on the maintenance record, had been identified through a facial recognition request submitted to an independent contractor with federal-level certification. One of the two men in the vehicle was a data broker with 2 prior federal investigations, both resulting in civil settlements. The other was a technology acquisitions officer for a firm that had attempted to purchase Voss Industries 18 months ago and been rejected by the board. The rejection had been Serena's decision. She had made it in this room. What the two men had been receiving, across 7 documented exchanges, was proprietary security architecture data, the encryption system specifications that Voss Industries' development division had spent 4 years and $60 million building. The kind of information that, in the hands of a competitor, would not simply erase a market advantage. It would end the company's reason for existing. A board member near the center of the table said, very quietly, "My God." Derek stood. "This is fabricated." His voice had lost the particular smoothness it carried in rooms where he was in charge. "This is a disgruntled employee constructing a grievance with—" "The camera log is time-stamped and unedited," Marcus said. His voice hadn't changed register. "The audio file has a documented chain of custody. The registration records are public. The facial identification was performed by an independent contractor, whose certification is on the last page of the 3rd folder." He let a breath pass. "I'm not making an argument. I'm showing you what I found, Serena." Derek turned to her directly now, abandoning the board. His composure had developed a fissure that was widening in real time. "You cannot allow a parking attendant to walk into a governance proceeding and—" "He's not a parking attendant." She said it the way you say something that stopped being complicated some time ago, and you should stop talking. Derek looked at the board members in sequence, searching for the nods he had cultivated over the previous 6 weeks. He found averted eyes. He found people reading documents. Ray Colton, who had been standing near the door throughout the presentation, opened it and stepped into the hallway. 2 men in civilian clothes were waiting there, both still in the specific way that comes from a particular kind of training. Ray recognized what he was looking at. One of them said, "Mr. Colton, we'd like you to stay." Back inside the room, Derek turned to Marcus with the expression of a man who has run out of maneuvers. What was left of his composure was small and brittle. "You don't have the authority for any of this," he said. "Who authorized you? Who do you think you are in this room?" Marcus looked at him without particular emotion, not contempt, not satisfaction, just the level attention of someone who has finished a job and is waiting for the room to catch up. "I'm the person who was in position," he said. The room held that. Derek had no answer for it. He sat down slowly, as though his legs had decided before he did. 2 weeks later, the security division of Voss Industries had a new structure. Ray Colton had resigned pending a federal inquiry. Derek Shaw had been removed from the board by unanimous vote and was being represented by counsel in proceedings that would take considerably longer than 2 weeks to resolve. Serena had called Marcus into her office 3 times in that period. The first 2 times were procedural documentation, statements, logistics. The 3rd time, she asked him to sit down and didn't have a tablet or a folder in front of her. "I want to offer you the Director of Security Coordination role," she said. "Full authority over the protection team, external movement protocols, and threat assessment for the next fiscal year. Marcus was quiet for a moment. I'd rather do it as an independent contractor, outside the employment structure. Why? He considered how to answer. I don't do well inside structures that can be reorganized. Serena studied the middle distance between them. Because you've seen what happens when they are. Yes, she nodded once. Independent contractor. 6-month renewable. You set the terms. All right. She reached for her water glass. You can go, Mr. Hale. He stood. He was at the door when she said, You told me you left your previous work because someone got hurt, that you weren't in position. He stopped. You were in position this time, she said. Every time. He didn't answer, but he didn't leave immediately. He stood at the door for one moment that was longer than departure but shorter than conversation. Then he left. He picked Jessie up from school at 3:45. Jessie ran to the car the way he always did, backpack bouncing, something in his hand he wanted to show. It was the drawing. The teacher had sent it home with a note, saying it had been displayed in the hallway, and several colleagues had commented on it. Marcus held the paper in the parking lot, while the other cars pulled away. Jessie watched him look at it. Do you know who the second person is? Jessie asked. Marcus looked at the figure with the yellow crown. He looked at the taller figure beside the smaller one. Yeah, he said. I think I do. He folded the drawing and put it in his jacket pocket. Jessie leaned against the window as Marcus pulled out of the lot. 3 days later, Serena came to the tower without her full escort. Just Priya, one step behind. Marcus was at the entrance when the car arrived, not because he had been told to be, but because he had read the arrival log. They stood in the main lobby. The light came through the high glass windows at a low afternoon angle that made the marble floor look warm. You never explained why you stayed, Serena said. Marcus looked at the staircase. Because the last time I walked away, someone fell and no one was there to catch them. Serena was quiet. Was that your wife? He didn't answer immediately. Outside, a car passed on the street. Inside, the lobby was still. It wasn't something I could have stopped, he said. But I wasn't there, and I've been thinking about that ever since. Serena turned her face toward the light. She had grown up in rooms like this, high ceilings, polished surfaces, architecture designed to make people feel small unless they already knew how not to. She had learned how not to. She had thought she learned it alone. My son's name is Jesse, Marcus said. He's 8. He likes to draw. Something in Serena's expression shifted, not dramatically, just at the edges. The controlled distance she carried in professional spaces moved by a degree. What does he draw? People. Mostly. People he thinks are important. She was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out her right hand, not searching, not uncertain, just extending it into the space between them. Marcus placed his hand in hers. The same steadiness, the same certainty, not formal, not hesitant, the same way he had caught her. The same grip that knew exactly where to be. This time neither of them was falling. This time they were both choosing. The light moved across the lobby floor. Outside, the city continued its ordinary noise. And inside, in the building where he had been invisible for 6 weeks, Marcus Hale stood in a room that finally knew his name and felt, for the first time in a long time, that being in position was no longer something he did alone.